Alexander Graham Bell. What if the greatest invention of your life is just a side effect? Alexander Graham Bell is remembered as the inventor of the telephone, even though he saw it as a distraction from his real work. His true goal was to help the deaf. His mother was deaf, and he spent his life searching for ways to transmit sound differently. It was during these experiments that he arrived at the idea of sending voice over distance. That's how the telephone was born. In 1876, Bell secured the patent, beating his competitors by mere hours. That same year, the first clear sentence was spoken. "Mr. Watson, come here, I want to see you." After Bell accidentally spilled acid on himself. Interestingly, Bell originally suggested answering the phone with "ahoy." It was Thomas Edison who popularized "hello." But the telephone wasn't his only invention. Bell created one of the first metal detectors, attempting to locate a bullet in a wounded president, and played a key role in developing the National Geographic Society. He considered his greatest achievement not the telephone, but the photophone, a device that transmitted sound using light. In many ways, it anticipated modern fiber optic communication. When Bell died, every telephone in the United States and Canada fell silent for 1 minute, in tribute. He proved that sometimes the greatest discoveries aren't the goal, but the byproduct of the search. Gregor Mendel. What if the laws of life can be calculated like a formula? Gregor Mendel is known today as the father of genetics. But during his lifetime, almost no one understood him. He was born into a poor family, and his path into science was far from obvious. To get an education, he entered a monastery, not out of devotion, but for the opportunity to study. His sister sacrificed her dowry so he could finish his education. Years later, Mendel repaid her by funding the education of her children. His key experiments took place in a monastery garden, where he crossbred pea plants. Unlike most scientists of his time, he approached biology like a mathematician, counting, recording, analyzing. He discovered the fundamental patterns of inheritance, dominance, segregation, and independent assortment. But his contemporaries didn't recognize the importance of his work. His research was published and ignored. Mathematics simply didn't belong in biology, at least not yet. Even Mendel himself struggled to reproduce the same results in other plants, and began to doubt whether his conclusions were universal. Beyond genetics, he had many interests: meteorology, beekeeping, and careful observation of nature. Only 16 years after his death were his laws rediscovered and finally recognized as foundational. He never saw his own impact. Thomas Edison. What if success isn't talent, but the ability to keep going after thousands of failures? Thomas Edison is often called the inventor of the light bulb, but that's not entirely true. Light bulbs existed before him. The problem was that they burned out quickly and weren't practical. Edison solved that problem. He tested over 6,000 materials for the filament, including, according to legend, a hair from his assistant's beard, before finding a working solution. He held 1,093 U.S. patents. But his greatest innovation wasn't a single invention, it was his system. He created the world's first invention factory, a laboratory where teams worked methodically on new ideas. Edison played a central role in the war of currents against Nikola Tesla, promoting direct current as safer, even though alternating current ultimately prevailed. By age 12, Edison had lost most of his hearing. He considered it an advantage, fewer distractions. He also had unusual habits. He slept in short bursts and tested job candidates in odd ways. For example, if someone salted their soup before tasting it, Edison saw them as someone who relied on assumptions, not observation, and wouldn't hire them. Edison showed that invention is not a flash of genius, but a process, where every failure moves you closer to success. Nikola Tesla. What if the future can be seen, long before it arrives? Nikola Tesla was called the man who invented the 20th century. He made alternating current the foundation of modern power systems. Tesla developed ways to transmit electricity over long distances and effectively tamed AC, making it efficient and scalable. But his ideas went far beyond his time. He predicted wireless energy transmission, global communication networks, and devices similar to modern smartphones. He was obsessed with the number 3, avoided physical contact due to fear of germs, and obsessively cleaned utensils, habits that began after he nearly died of cholera as a young man. One of his most ambitious projects was the Wardenclyffe Tower, an attempt to build a global wireless energy system. The project was shut down once investors realized there was no clear way to charge for energy transmitted through the air. Beyond his most famous inventions, Tesla had another reputation among engineers. He was often the man called in when large-scale projects were on the verge of failure. Power stations, transmission systems, experimental installations. If something critical broke down, Tesla could diagnose and fix it in extremely short timeframes, almost as if he saw entire systems at once rather than individual parts. Despite working on projects worth enormous sums of money, he rarely benefited from them. Investors repeatedly withdrew funding, changed agreements, or simply cut him off when his ideas became too ambitious or too difficult to monetize. Tesla showed that the line between genius and madness often lies where ideas are simply too far ahead of their time. Marie Curie. What if science demands not just intelligence, but sacrifice? Marie Curie became a symbol of resilience in science. She was called the Iron Lady, not for her personality, but for her ability to work under conditions few could endure. She made her greatest discoveries, polonium and radium, in primitive conditions, essentially in a shed, processing tons of ore by hand alongside her husband. She named polonium after her homeland, Poland. During World War I, she developed mobile X-ray units, known as Little Curies, which helped doctors locate shrapnel inside wounded soldiers. She personally trained over 150 women to operate them. Curie carried vials of radioactive material in her pockets, fascinated by their glow, unaware of the danger radiation posed. She refused to patent her discoveries, believing science should serve humanity, not profit. After Pierre Curie's death, she took over his academic position at the Sorbonne, becoming the first female professor in the history of the university. Her lectures were known for their precision and intensity, attracting students who came not for comfort, but for rigor. Curie was also one of the first scientists to face the long-term consequences of her own discoveries. Over time, radiation exposure affected her health, and she continued working despite growing symptoms, driven by a sense of duty rather than caution. She remains the only person to win 2 Nobel Prizes in different scientific fields, physics and chemistry. She proved that true science is not just about discovery, but about the price you are willing to pay for it. Konstantin Tsiolkovsky. What if the path to the stars begins? Not in a lab, but in imagination. Konstantin Tsiolkovsky lost most of his hearing as a child after scarlet fever, and was expelled from school because he couldn't follow lessons. He had almost no formal education. He became self-taught and worked as a simple math teacher in small Russian towns. It was there that he developed ideas that would later become the foundation of space exploration. Tsiolkovsky was the first to mathematically describe rocket motion and show how humanity could leave Earth. His famous rocket equation remains fundamental to aerospace engineering. He also sketched early multi-stage rocket designs on paper, decades before they became reality. He predicted space stations, spacewalks, life in zero gravity, and even the possibility of growing plants in space. He also explored the concept of a space elevator. His words became a symbol of the space age. Earth is the cradle of humanity, but one cannot live in the cradle forever. He also designed strange concepts: giant kites, ice sailing vehicles, searching for new ways to move. Despite the scale of his ideas and eventual recognition, he lived modestly until the end of his life. He never saw spaceflight, but future rocket engineers would call him their greatest teacher. Tsiolkovsky showed that great discoveries don't begin with resources, but with an idea no one believes in yet.
History is not just what happened, it's what still echoes within us. If you felt this story, don't let it fade. Subscribe and step with us into the next chapter.